Do this right now. Take your tongue and slowly drag it across the back of your two upper front teeth. Just do it. Most people feel something pretty flat and smooth back there, nothing unusual. Just a plain surface, but a small number of you just felt something different. A raised edge running up each side of the tooth, a little hollow in the middle, like the back of the tooth is shaped like a tiny spoon or a small shovel blade. If you felt that, stop for a second. Because what just happened inside your mouth is not random. It is not a dental quirk. It is not something your dentist caused or your diet shaped. What you just felt with the tip of your tongue is a physical message written into your body by events that happened tens of thousands of years before you were born, before your grandparents were born, before any civilization on Earth existed at all. That little scoop on the back of your tooth is one of the most precise genetic signals the human body can carry. And almost nobody who has it even knows it is there. It is invisible in your mirror. It causes no pain. It never causes any trouble. You could live your entire life and never once think about it. And yet it is sitting there quietly in your enamel, pointing back across thousands of years to a specific moment, a specific place, and a specific group of people who were fighting to survive in one of the coldest and darkest corners of the ancient world. Today, we're going to follow that little scoop all the way back to where it came from. And the answer is going to change the way you think about your own body, because that shape in your teeth was never really about teeth at all. Let us start from the beginning with the actual tooth shape itself, because scientists and dentists have been aware of this for more than 100 years. The official term for it is shovel-shaped incisors. When you look at a normal front tooth from behind, the back surface is basically flat. Unremarkable. But a shovel-shaped incisor is different. It has two raised ridges running along the left and right edges of the tooth, curling slightly inward. Between those two ridges, there's a sunken hollow. The whole shape looks like the blade of a garden spade, or a small shovel, which is exactly why scientists named it that. It is actually very easy to feel with your tongue if you know what to look for. And if you want to see it, you can flip your lip back, find a bright light, and look at the inside of your upper front teeth. If you have the shovel shape, you will see those raised ridges curling in from both sides. Now here is the part that grabbed the attention of researchers for generations. This tooth shape does not appear equally everywhere in the world, not even close. The pattern is sharp, almost dramatic. Among people whose ancestry traces back to East Asia, to China, Japan, Korea, Mongolia, and the surrounding regions, shovel-shaped incisors are extremely common. The great majority of people from these populations have them. And among the indigenous peoples of the Americas, the same thing is true. Before European settlers ever arrived, shoveled incisors were essentially universal among the native populations of North, Central, and South America. But then you move to other parts of the world and the picture flips completely. Among people of European ancestry, the trait is rare. Among people of African ancestry, it is almost entirely absent. So you have this one very specific physical feature that is found in nearly everyone in one part of the world and in almost nobody in another part of the world. That is a striking pattern. That is the kind of pattern that tells the scientists something important happened. Something drew a hard line across the human species and left the evidence sitting inside people's mouths. This pattern was useful to anthropologists for a very practical reason. Teeth last. Long after everything else about a human body has dissolved back into the earth, the enamel of the teeth survives. Ancient burial sites, archaeological digs, fossil records, the teeth come through when nothing else does. And because the shovel shape was so reliable, so consistent, so strongly linked to specific populations, researchers studying ancient human remains could look at a jaw from thousands of years ago and start to figure out where those people came from, how they moved, which group they belonged to. The shovel became a tool for tracing ancient migrations, a signpost in the fossil record. Scientists could read the teeth the way you might read a return address on a letter. Long before anyone could analyze DNA, the tooth shape was already telling the story. The first and most obvious theory for why this tooth shape existed was also the simplest. Maybe it was just about eating. Think about it logically. A tooth with two raised edges and a reinforced structure is a slightly stronger tooth. It can handle more stress. It is more resistant to the kinds of forces that can chip or crack a flat incisor. So researchers proposed that ancient peoples in Asia and in the Americas were using their front teeth the way many traditional societies historically have, not just for eating food, but as a kind of third hand, gripping hides to work them soft, holding fibers while their hands were busy, biting through tough material, processing animal skins during those long, cold winters. Under those conditions, a stronger, more structurally reinforced front tooth would have been an advantage. A person with that sturdier tooth shape would wear down less, break their teeth less, and do better overall. So the theory was that this advantage got selected by nature over thousands of years, slowly increasing the frequency of the shovel shape across those populations until it became the norm. It is a sensible theory. It respects the actual lives of the people involved. It does not require anything exotic. It is exactly the kind of straightforward functional explanation that feels satisfying, and it turned out to be incomplete in the most surprising way imaginable. Because when geneticists finally tracked down the gene responsible for the shovel shape, the whole chewing theory collapsed. Not because it was entirely wrong, but because the shovel shape was not being selected for on its own at all. It was just along for the ride. The actual selection pressure was happening somewhere else in the body entirely, on a completely different structure, for a completely different reason. The tooth was a passenger. This is where the story takes the turn that nobody expected. The gene behind the shovel shape is called EDAR. That stands for ectodysplastin A receptor, which is a technical name for something that functions like a master control switch in the developing embryo. In 2009, a research team led by a scientist named Ryosuke Kimura published a study in a major genetics journal where they measured the teeth of large numbers of people and matched those measurements against their DNA. What they found was clear. One specific variant of the EDAR gene, a change called V372A, was a strong and reliable predictor of shovel-shaped incisors. If your DNA carried that particular version, your front teeth almost certainly had the shovel. The gene had been found. That part of the mystery was solved. But here's the thing about EDAR that changed everything. EDAR is not a tooth gene. It is not some narrow specialist that only works on enamel. EDAR is a broad developmental signal that fires early in the growth of an embryo and helps shape an entire group of structures that all develop from the same original tissue layer. That tissue layer is called the ectoderm, and it produces a wide range of structures in the body: hair follicles, sweat glands, teeth, the glands of the breast. All of these structures take their developmental cues in part from the EDAR pathway, which means that when the V372A variant changes how EDAR behaves, it does not change one single thing. It changes the whole package at once. Scientists have a word for this. They call it pleiotropy, when one gene affects multiple different traits simultaneously. And that is exactly what EDAR V372A does. Touch the gene and you touch the teeth, the hair, the sweat glands, the breast tissue, all at the same time. So the shovel shape in the tooth is just the most visible piece of something much bigger. A tiny flag waving above a buried structure that runs much deeper. This realization forced a new question. If that V370A variant was spreading through populations by natural selection, it was not spreading because of the tooth shape. So what was it spreading for? What advantage was this gene actually providing that was strong enough to push it through an entire population? The first candidate answer was hair. The same EDR variant that gives the shoveled incisor also produces noticeably thicker and straighter hair shafts. The dense, straight, dark hair that is characteristic of East Asian populations. And thicker hair in a cold environment is genuinely useful. It provides better insulation. So for a time, the leading hypothesis was that the gene spread because of what it did to hair. That in cold northern climates, thicker hair helped people stay warmer, and that was the advantage driving the selection. But that explanation hit a wall. The problem is the scale of the selection. The V378A variant shows one of the strongest signals of recent positive selection anywhere in the entire human genome. That means it spread through populations with unusual speed and force. And hair thickness, while helpful, is not typically the kind of difference that determines whether you live or die, whether your children survive or not. You need something bigger than hair thickness to explain selection pressure that strong, something that was genuinely the difference between surviving and not. So the hair theory left researchers looking for a bigger driver, and they found it by doing something remarkable. They put the human gene into a mouse. In 2013, a team led by researcher Yana Kambarov published a study in the journal Cell. They engineered mice to carry the exact same V370A variant that humans carry. Then they watched carefully to see what it changed in the mouse bodies. The mice grew thicker hair, as expected. Their tooth shape changed, also as expected. But the finding that mattered most was somewhere neither the teeth nor the hair. The mice with the human V372A variant grew a higher density of sweat glands in their skin. And they showed significant changes in the structure of their mammary glands, specifically the branching of the mammary ducts. The internal network of channels that carries milk was more elaborate, more branched, more developed in those mice. And that single result opened the door to the most powerful explanation yet. One that did not come from studying teeth or hair at all. One that came from thinking about mothers and babies in an ice age. Here is how researchers put the pieces together, and the logic is clean and genuinely remarkable. The V370A variant is estimated to have first appeared somewhere in northern China, roughly 30,000 to 35,000 years ago. That timing places it right at the edge of the most brutal phase of the last great ice age, a period climate scientists call the last glacial maximum. Now, think about where the descendants of those people went from there. They moved north and east, into Siberia, into increasingly cold, dark, difficult territory. And eventually some of them reached the edge of what is now the sea between Russia and Alaska. But at that time, because so much of the Earth's water was locked up in glaciers, sea levels were dramatically lower than today. Where the Bering Strait sits now, there was dry land, a broad, flat, cold grassland connecting Asia to North America. Researchers call it Beringia. The ancestors of the Native Americans did not simply stroll across that land bridge. Genetic evidence tells a more complicated story. Those ancestral populations appear to have been geographically trapped in Beringia for thousands of years, unable to move south into the Americas because two massive ice sheets were pressing down from the north and blocking the way. This period, when a founding population was genetically isolated on that frozen plain for potentially thousands of generations, is called the Beringian standstill. And that standstill was the crucible. That is where the selection happened. Think about what life in Beringia during the last glacial maximum actually looked like. The sun barely rose in winter. For months at a time, the sky was dark or dim. The UV radiation that the human body needs to produce vitamin D was almost entirely absent for long stretches of the year. And vitamin D is not optional. It is essential. Among its many functions, vitamin D plays a central role in how the body absorbs calcium. It supports immune function. And in a nursing mother, it is critical for what gets passed through breast milk to an infant. A mother who is severely vitamin D deficient cannot pass adequate nutrition to her baby through her milk. In an environment that starves people of sunlight for months on end, that becomes a survival problem of the most urgent kind. Babies that do not get enough nutrition from their mother's milk in winter do not survive the winter. Now bring the EDAR gene back into this picture. The V372A variant increases the branching density of the mammary gland ducts. More branching means a more developed, more elaborate internal gland structure. And researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, led by scientist Leslie Hlusko, published work in 2018 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, arguing that this enhanced mammary duct structure likely helped mothers transmit more fat, more vitamin D, and more critical fatty acids through their breast milk to their infants. In an environment where sunlight was almost gone and vitamin D was desperately scarce, a mother whose body happened to carry the V372A variant may have been able to keep her baby better nourished. And that baby survived. And that baby grew up and had children of its own, and the gene kept spreading, generation after generation, winter after winter, across thousands of years of isolation on that frozen plain. The variant that helped mothers feed their children more effectively became more and more common, until it was nearly universal in that population. And when the ice finally shifted, when the glaciers retreated enough to open a path south, those people poured into the Americas carrying that gene with them, all the way south, through North America, through Central America, all the way to the tip of South America. And they carried it in their teeth, in their hair, in their sweat glands, and in the structure of their mammary glands, all of it traveling together because it all came from the same gene, all of it a package deal. The shovel in the tooth was just the quiet, visible, enamel-hard proof that the package had arrived. Step back for a moment and let the full picture settle. For over a century, scientists saw this tooth shape and tried to explain it. They found the pattern, traced it across populations, and built theories around chewing and diet and tool use. And those theories were not foolish. They were reasonable. But the actual answer was hiding deeper, in a gene that was never about teeth, doing its most important work in the bodies of mothers trying to keep infants alive in the longest winters the world had seen in thousands of years. The shovel in the tooth was a side effect of one of the most powerful selection events in recent human evolution. And it was a selection event driven by love and survival in the most immediate sense possible. Mothers passing life to children when everything around them was frozen and dark. There is another layer to this that deserves to be said clearly. The V372A variant is not present in Denisovan ancient DNA samples. It appears to have arisen in the human lineage after that split. It is not found in people of African or European ancestry in any significant frequency. It appears specifically in the populations whose ancestry runs through that East Asian and Beringian world, which means that if you run your tongue across your front teeth right now and you feel that shovel shape, you are not just carrying a dental quirk. You're carrying traceable, physical, genetic evidence that somewhere in your ancestry, there is a line that passed through that specific world, through northern China, through Siberia, through the Ice Age crossroads of Beringia, or through the Americas that were populated from that same source. Your tooth is an address. It points to a real place and a real time with remarkable precision. What makes this particularly striking is how silent it is. You cannot see it in your face. Nobody looking at you would know it was there. Your family may have no stories about it, no knowledge of it, no cultural memory that connects to it. The line may be distant, generations and generations back, diluted through centuries of history. And yet the enamel kept the record. Long after every story got lost, every language shifted, every border changed, the tooth held on to the information, Enamel is among the hardest substances the human body makes. It outlasts almost everything else, which is perhaps fitting, because the story it is preserving is one of the oldest and most important in the human record. The peopling of an empty hemisphere, the survival of a founding population through the coldest part of an ice age, the invisible work of mothers in the dark. The 2024 research published in dental science journals continues to reinforce this picture, showing that the EDAR gene's influence on tooth morphology is part of a broader developmental cascade. Scientists now understand that the same gene also affects the number of cusps on lower molars, the roots of certain premolars, and several other dental features that cluster together in East Asian and indigenous American populations as a package, all tied back to that one genetic variant, all carried forward through time in the same way. And then there is the question this whole story leaves sitting in the air. If the teeth are carrying ancient information, this specific, this detailed, this precisely traceable, what else is sitting quietly inside your body, telling stories you have never thought to ask about? Your hair texture, the pattern of your sweat glands, the shape of structures you will never see and probably never think about. Every one of those things has a history. Every one of them is the product of selection pressures in specific environments at specific moments in time. Your body is not just yours. It is a long chain of decisions that survival made, reaching all the way back through ice ages and migrations and standstills and crossings into new worlds. You are the living end of an unbroken line that goes back to the very first human beings. And every now and then, one of the links in that chain leaves a mark you can still feel. Run your tongues across those teeth one more time. If you feel the ridge, if you feel the scoop, you are feeling ice. You are feeling darkness and winter and the warmth of a mother's body and the quiet survival of children who had no idea what gene they carried. You are feeling the last glacial maximum expressed in enamel, waiting patiently for someone to finally ask the right question. Now you know the answer. And the answer turns out to be about something far older, far colder, and far more human than anyone looking at a tooth chart 100 years ago could possibly have imagined. The scoop in your teeth is not a feature. It is a memory, and it has been waiting inside your mouth your entire life.